Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 books that I have read in the first half of 2018. We're halfway through July, but I'm only going to be talking about the books that I have read prior to June 30th. That way I can make another one of these videos in December and it makes more sense. So even though I've already had some great reads in July, I am not adding those to this list. Now, as of June 30th, I had completed 43 books and 12 of those were 5-star reads. So narrowing it down to 5 books was a little bit complicated, but anyways, I'm really excited about this video and I'm really excited to share with you some of my favorite books. The first book that I want to talk about is actually one of the first books that I read of the year, and it still remained in the top 5, so that should tell you how good it was. And I've talked about it multiple times on this channel, and that is London Can You Wait by Jacqueline Middleton. This is technically the sequel to London Belongs to Me, which I have talked about before, and I read this one last year and then read this one in January. Now, I do not do a lot of full-length book reviews, but this was a book that I did actually review back in January after I finished it, so I will link that video up in the description below, or up in there and in the description below. And if you wanted to check it out, my full-length spoiler-free review. Basically, this book follows Alex and Mark. Alex moved to London after graduating college to become a playwright. And in the first book, that's the whole journey of her trying to get this play published and on a stage. So this kind of happens, it's after the happily ever after. Obviously, there's a romance involved, but that, even though it's the main plot of the story, does not completely encompass the book. There's so much other things that are going on. There's a lot of diversity in this book, but it's not in your face. It's very subtle. There's a person of color, there is LGBTQ rep. There's a lot that's going on in this book that Jacqueline Middleton puts together so nicely, wraps everything up in a beautiful bow, and it's one of my favorite books that I have read, definitely one of my favorites of the year. Obviously, that's why it's in this video. One of my favorite things is that Alex deals with anxiety and has panic attacks, and Jacqueline Middleton does an absolutely fantastic job with that representation. She doesn't kind of throw it under the rug. It's very obvious in her desire to get help in this book, and that was just very, very welcoming and a nice change of pace for some books that I read. This one is very out in the open. It's a very big part of the plot of this book. Next book that I'm going to be talking about is a recent favorite of mine and has been talked about on this channel multiple times recently. So if you have been around for a little while, you probably know what I'm going to be talking about, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hong. This was an absolutely amazing contemporary romance. If you can't tell, there's kind of a trend here. I like my contemporary romances. But again, this one deals with mental health. Stella is I keep wanting to say a mathematician. She's an economist or a statistician. There we go. That's the word. And she has Asperger's. And so her mother is trying to tell her she needs to date and get married and have kids and everything that goes along with that. Well, she doesn't like dating and having sex. So she hires Michael, who is a male prostitute or a male escort, and to try to teach her how to be a girlfriend and how to date and how to have sex and all of this other stuff. If you would like to hear about my full-length review, I'm going to put my June wrap-up in the cards. I think it was my June wrap-up. Yes, it was. And that one is kind of where I go into more detail about this, but I've talked about this book a lot on this channel recently, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But definitely a very, very good book. It was one of the book of the month picks for June, and this is a debut author. So this is her first book. She does have a new one coming out next year, I believe. It's the same world, the same character, sort of. It's actually following Michael's cousin, I believe, who also has Asperger's. I'm really excited to pick that book up. The next book is not a book, but a collection of poetry. And this is actually a new author to me. I read her first book back in March and absolutely loved it. And then I picked up the second book last month and loved it even more. And this book kind of tore me apart. These poems, they're so raw and so real, and that is The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace. You should definitely pick up both of hers. So this one is the second one. The first one is The Princess Saves Herself in this one. This one is all about women's empowerment and feminism and just like being a badass. And it's so real, and there's just a couple of ones that I kind of want to read to you guys because that's really the only way to authentically tell you how much I love this book, is just to kind of let you hear it, and then you can get the shivers down your spine too. So in this novel, the woman protagonist claims she's not like those other girls, not because she finds their femininity to be an insult or a weakness. No, it's because she knows all women have their own unique magic that cannot be replicated by her or any other woman. The plot twist we've all been waiting for. This one talks about she talks about the women's marches and the inauguration of Trump and all of those other, like, everything that went along after that. And this one is right after she talks about the marches, and it says, when you take it upon yourself to politicize human bodies and the right to keep breathing without paying a steep price for it, don't pretend to be shocked when we start taking politics personally, as you tell us to deal with it. I can't wait to actually reread this one. I did it as part of a readathon, and so I did read it a little bit faster than I normally would. But I really want to go back and reread this and just devour the poems and study them, and I'm really looking forward to doing that again. So that's definitely going to be something that I want to do in the second half of the year. But for now, sometimes I'll just go through, just read a couple of them. I don't know, not going through all of them, but it's so empowering and beautiful and real. Next book that I am going to talk about is going to be, no surprise that this is on my top 5 favorites. I feel like this should be on everyone's favorites list just because of how real this book is and how thought-provoking and powerful this book is. This is a book that got put on the banned book list, even though it's a book that every student should read, because it's something that we're dealing with in our current time. And I feel like this is going to be a book that becomes a classic and hopefully eventually gets off the banned book list, because it is a book that everyone needs to read, and that is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. If you have not read this book, please do. That's the first thing. And also, Where Have You Been? This book follows the life of Star, who witnesses her friend be murdered by a police officer, and everything that ensues after that. The riots, the fights, the court, when the police officer is finally brought to justice, and all of that stuff, and just Star learning how to speak up for herself and for her community. And like I said, it was very much created from the Black Lives Matter movement. It is definitely a book that you should read. The audio version, I listened to this book on audio for the first time, and it is so powerful. I think it's even more powerful than when you just read it, just because you really feel engrossed in the book. This is a movie that's coming out, I think, this fall. I don't know. I just saw the trailer for it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really excited about it. But I'm very, very excited about the movie, and I really hope that when the movie comes out, that this book gets a whole new level of hype, kind of like Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda did when Love, Simon came out. So I'm really excited to see that. And the 5th and final book that I'm going to be talking about today is probably my favorite book of the year. It is also another recent read, and so I have talked about it recently. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about it because everyone has talked about this book in the last 6 months to a year, I guess. And that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is, I don't know how to classify this, whether or not it's a historical fiction or a contemporary. I believe Book of the Month described it as a historical fiction, but it's kind of both because it does like the flashbacks. So Evelyn Hugo is kind of the Elizabeth Taylor of this fake Hollywood, but it doesn't seem fake. I have talked about the fact that when I was going through this book, I was trying to like visualize the movies and then try to look them up to see if they were real. And it took me a minute to realize that they were not. It was that, like, the writing was that good. It just felt like I was reading a memoir. So Evelyn Hugo, she's retired at the end of her career, and so she hires Monique, who is she's a reporter for a magazine, and so she is there under the guise of she's going to write a cover story about Evelyn Hugo and her life and the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo. But it turns out that Evelyn wants Monique to write her biography and goes through her entire love life and the 7 husbands and her career and the movies she was in, all of this other stuff. It's not really a spoiler to tell you that Evelyn Hugo is bisexual, and the representation for that was just absolutely fantastic. I mean, it was the 60s, 70s, 80s, and so that wasn't something that was necessarily, you wouldn't have announced that you were bisexual, and so there was all of this having to cover up and get married to somebody just to prove that you weren't gay, just to keep her career and to be able to still be getting the movies that she was wanting to be in. So that whole aspect of it was just fantastic. There's a plot twist in it that you don't normally see with contemporary, this genre of fiction. This book really did have it all. The plot twist I didn't see coming. While the book was a little bit slow to get into, I had a difficulty reading the beginning of it just in staying invested in it. I don't know that that was necessarily this book's fault, or because I was wanting to read so many other different things at the same time. But once I got to about probably like the 30 to 40% mark, I literally could not put the book down, and I think I finished it in 2 days at that point. So it's really, really good for me. This will probably end up being one of my favorite books of the year, maybe possibly all times. I'm really excited to pick up another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. This was the first one that I had read of hers. And while I know that this one tends to be a little bit different than the other books that she writes, I loved her writing style, and so that's definitely something that I am interested in reading some more of her work. Alright guys, that is all I have for you today. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below if you want to see more of me and my work, my face, my crazy face. Let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of these books, if these were on your favorites, and if not, what were your favorite books of the first half of 2018. And I will talk to you guys all in the comments. We'll see you. Bye.